Hello and welcome to Community Bookstore's virtual event series. I'm Stephanie Valdez. I'm the co-owner of the bookstore. Tonight, we're joined by Nan Bauer-Maglin and Vicki Breitbart, editors of the new collection, Tock, Essays on Becoming a Parent After 40. They will be joined by several other contributors to the collection. Community Bookstore will be celebrating 50 years in business this fall, and we credit the support of readers and writers for this milestone. Thank you for spending an evening with us. Now for some housekeeping. You should be able to see and hear our presenters, but they cannot see or hear you. If you would like an audio transcription, you can turn that on at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat button here at the bottom through which I'll be posting a link to purchase tonight's book if you haven't already. And finally, we've scheduled a whole host of fall programming. For instance, on October 20th, Julie Kay and Catherine Colbert join us to present their new book, Controlling Women, What We Must Do Now to Protect Reproductive Freedom. They will be in conversation with Farai Chidea. And now I'll turn things over to Nan Bauer-Maglin.
Thanks. Welcome everyone to our presentation and discussion of Tock, Essays on Becoming a Parent After 40. I'm Nan Bauer-Maglin, as Stephanie said, co-editor of Tock. I will be moderating the discussion. First, I want to thank Stephanie and Community Books for hosting this reading. I encourage everyone to buy Tock from them and other books from them. Let me just sketch out how the hour or so will go. Vicki Breitbart, co-editor and contributor to the book, will first give you an introduction and overview of Tock. Then Salma Abdelnour Gilman will talk about and read from her piece, We Can Wait, but Are We Paying Too High a Price? And that piece is from part 1 of the book, Why Did It Take So Long? After Salma, Laura Broadwell will read or talk about her piece, Life in Balance, which is from part 3 of the book. Part 3 is, Does Age Matter If I Adopt? Then Jean Leung will talk about her piece, My Grandmother, My Mother, Myself, and My Son, from part 4, Parenting After 40. And last will be Catherine Arnst with her piece, What is Hard? Also from part 4. We will then have a discussion between Vicki and the 4 presenters, after which we will open it for question and answers if we have time. And you'll see on the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. Please write your question in there. So let me say, Vicki, you take us, introduce the book.
Hi, thanks, Nan. This book is very personal to me. I adopted my daughter Maya when I was 55, and I got a lot of negative comments, mostly about age. And I talked with other people in similar situations and realized that my experience was shared by many. Becoming a parent after 40 is a growing phenomenon in this country. While the general fertility rate in the United States is at a record low, especially for those in 20 and 30-year-olds, the number of births to women over the age of 40 has increased every year since 1985. Adoption by older people is becoming more common too. Regardless of this trend, though, becoming a parent at this, quote, advanced age is not yet generally accepted. Tock asked the question, how old is too old to become a parent? This book is for anyone approaching or over 40 who is considering becoming a parent, trying to become pregnant to be a parent, thinking about adoption, is a partner of any of these people, or has already gone through any of these experiences. The authors are diverse. They're white, they're people of color, and they come from different backgrounds and cultures. They're men, women, gay, straight. Many have felt stigmatized or chastised because they weren't becoming parents until they were older. We are questioned and often made to feel that something is wrong with us. Many of us encountered questions, comments, judgments from doctors, friends, families, and from strangers because of our age as we became parents. Tock seeks to counter these negative attitudes while not denying that some of the challenges for those who become parents as they approach or are over 40. As stories in TikTok will reveal, becoming parents later in life may mean facing issues of infertility, smaller families, less involved with our own parents, financial burdens, and additional health issues as we age. It also brings great fulfillment and joy. The book is divided into 5 sections. The first asks, why did it take so long? The narratives in TikTok demonstrate how changing gender roles and the nature of relationships in our society affect the timeline for becoming a parent. Traditionally, the order is supposed to be first you get the relationship and then parenthood. But for some of these authors, however, the right relationship took much longer than they imagined. For others, they decided to have a child without having the romantic partnership at all. For gay parents in this book, the process of claiming their own sexual orientation took time, and in spite of some social changes, severely limited their parenting options. TikTok authors often delay childbearing not by choice, but rather the result of circumstances outside of their control. While our culture says it honors motherhood, it simultaneously makes it difficult to manage the dual role of parent and provider. For many, it is hard to imagine developing a productive work life while raising children, and difficult to feel you can adequately provide for them. Section 2 focuses on pregnancy, trying to get pregnant and being pregnant after 40. We have one essay in the book of a woman who actually gave birth at 58. Reproductive technologies has drastically changed this narrative. Those who have the resources try assisted reproductive technology, known as ART. The use of ART has doubled over the past decade, but treatments are not without risks and are prohibitively expensive. Getting the family you want through ART can come with a hefty price tag, sometimes over $100,000. Only 17 states have enacted laws that require some type of infertility coverage by private insurance, and there is no ART coverage for people on public assistance. There are stories in the book where women have been successful having children with ART, but many women with resources can go through several rounds of treatments only to be disappointed with the results. The success rate depends on many factors, including the type of procedure, the age of the woman, environmental, economic, and social factors, including systemic racism, can affect this. For people of color, racial discrimination over a lifetime can greatly increase the risk for healthy pregnancy and childbirth after 40. New research about male fertility challenges the assumption that this is only a female issue. It suggests that men too have a biological clock. Section 3 focuses on older individuals who chose to adopt after the age of 40. As I learned, the journey towards adoption can be long and arduous and potentially very costly. The price tag for domestic adoption can be around $45,000, and for international adoption around $50,000, and that doesn't even include the travel. The age of parents is another factor in adoption. I had wanted to adopt from China, but because the combined age of my husband and myself was over 100, it was not going to happen. Many adoption agencies keep the difference between the child and the youngest parent at 40 years. In adoptions where birth parents select the adoptive home, they may feel that younger parents are more desirable. In international adoption, each country has age, guidelines, and restrictions. Often in adoption, authors like myself found ourselves raising a child of a different race and culture than ours. Being a race-conscious parent requires the courage to place our child's identity over our own discomfort and fears. TikTok contributors who raise children of color, white TikTok contributors who raise children of color remind us that in the midst of a racist society, our children have complex identity issues in addition to the issues of being raised by an older parent. As TikTok authors, we often find ourselves having a hard time just keeping up with our younger counterparts. We often find ourselves with different social references than the mothers of other children. And sometimes we feel alone and isolated. I remember when my daughter was having her 5th birthday party, one of the mothers called me to say that her daughter couldn't come because her daughter was going to the grandmother's 60th birthday celebration. I was 60 at the time. At times, as older parents, we experienced a larger than normal generation gap between ourselves and our own children. And I found that one of the most difficult emotional issues of being an older parent is confronting our own mortality. In fact, the United States, we are living longer, and when we think of how much, but we often think of how much our children's lives we may not get to experience. TikTok parents are often once again confronting the odds. Section 5 encapsulates many of the themes throughout the book, but the focus is on how, as older parents, we have formed support groups and created our own communities of caring friends and family and adults to sustain ourselves and our children throughout our unique journeys. Some of the authors refer to the estrangement they feel from their own families about motherhood. Many did not have the benefits of the more traditional extended family, but found support from partners, from friends, and when necessary, they created their own groups in person and online. Going against society's norms makes it difficult for older parents in this book to acknowledge our interdependence and to find or create our own communities of support. Overall, the stories in TikTok are very positive, yet they underscore the inequities that exist in being able to successfully deliver healthy babies and raise healthy children when you are over the age of 40. TikTok authors could afford to try different methods of ART. They could find the best medical providers when they were pregnant. They had the means to pay for adoption services and international travel when necessary. As older parents, we had the opportunities and privilege, the health, the emotional strength, financial means, and family stability to make it work. The feminist and social justice movements over the past decade laid the groundwork for confronting traditional norms and notions of family, as we do in this book. The increased number of older parents challenges the notion of who can become a parent and when, and it exposes the inequities of age, race, class, and gender. By our very actions, contributors to TikTok call for a new narrative and for radical change for attitudes and policy differences like paid family leave, childcare, and equal pay that can foster creating families at any age and caring environments for all children, regardless of the parent's age or circumstances. For those who are in the process of becoming parents over 40, we hope that TikTok will help make that process feel less ominous, if not easier. For those who have already become older parents, we hope this book will be seen as an appreciation of your life experiences. Mostly, we hope the book will affirm parenthood at any age. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Salma. It's great to be here tonight. Thanks to everyone for coming. I wrote this essay because it helped me wrestle and work through the contradictory feelings that I was wrestling with about having kids in my 40s. There was the initial excitement I felt about all the choices women have now about delaying parenthood and waiting until their 40s or later to have kids if they want to. But that feeling was soon followed by a more troubling feeling about my own experiences in childbirth and about the choices that are realistically available to women now, despite all the impressive advances in healthcare and in reproductive technology. I'll read an excerpt from my essay and hope to capture at least a little bit of what I've been wrestling with. And I look forward to the discussion with you all afterwards. I'll start in the section kind of in the middle where I talk about how much I craved freedom in my 20s and 30s and how little I was craving babies until one day everything changed. The magazine internship that I did the summer after college led to the career that I'd set my sights on, to a journey that, for all of its stomach-churning stress, steered me into the food and travel editor jobs that I dreamed about. I hopped an international flight every month, went to all the new restaurants in town, rode the dating roller coaster, listened to music and read novels for hours late at night, and mostly did whatever I felt like or what I could afford. Romance and adventure were on my short list. Babies, no. Also, how could a person's body even do that? Have a baby, I wondered. The question nagged at me during my 20s and lasted through the end of my 30s. I couldn't imagine the trauma women put themselves through. I had a hunch that my body wasn't built to handle that and probably wouldn't survive it. Even women I knew who were in no hurry to have a family seemed puzzled by my certainty that I didn't want kids. But fortunately, my parents didn't seem alarmed that I would deny them grandkids, probably because my younger brother had nothing against becoming a dad one day. Not everyone shared my parents' laissez-faire policy. Our family's Lebanese relatives and friends, many of them based in Beirut and others in Europe and around the US, include plenty of free-thinking and live and let live types. But the "what do you mean you're not getting married" contingent is strong. The closer I got to my mid-30s, the more those inquiring minds wanted to know what I was up to in the romance department and to push me along. One day, when I was 36, a family friend who lived in New York called me up. She had an idea. "I know a wonderful Lebanese furniture executive you should meet," she said to me. "No thanks, no furniture executives, please," I said, whatever that even meant. My cousin who lived in London called soon afterwards. He had an idea. He had a colleague I should definitely go out with, a successful, well-traveled investment banker a few years older than me. "Listen, he's not what he sounds like," my cousin said. "Just have a drink with him the next time he's in New York." I finally broke down and agreed to meet the furniture executive and the banker and some of the other guys that my worried minders kept sending my way. Those men generally seemed like intelligent, considerate people, but when trying to picture a future with them, or even a second date, my mind would go blank. What I could picture was a life that looked like the one a few older Lebanese women I knew were leading. They lived in Beirut their whole lives and stayed unmarried, instead pouring energy into their careers in academia or the arts. They traveled, hosted lively dinner parties, carved out their own space in the world. They fended off cultural pressure to go the marriage and family route and learned how to steel themselves in social situations where they would get judged and interrogated or just glanced at with pity. Some had wanted to get married someday, but given up for one reason or another, while others, like me, had just never envisioned that life for themselves. It wasn't until the tip end of my 30s, standing on the verge of my 40th birthday, that everything changed. That change didn't look or sound like a clock. As far as I could tell, I didn't have any clock, the kind that preoccupied many single women friends around my age, and some of my male friends too. That change didn't sound like a voice saying, "Have kids now before it's too late." The change looked like a funny, opinionated, heart-poundingly cute guy I'd started dating. Fast forward through months of on-again, off-again dating and heartache, and through our gradually more intense relationship, and to the decision to move in together a few years later. With him, everything felt like an adventure. Even marriage and, well, whatever else, wouldn't feel confining with this guy. I had a hunch about this. Within a couple of months of moving in together, I was pregnant. Our son was born halfway into my 42nd year, soon after we'd gone to City Hall for our marriage certificate. Our daughter was born around a year and a half later. Somehow we'd managed to conceive both babies without IVF or any other intervention. It only took a month or two to get pregnant both times. And the only explanation I have for this is what my mother told me when I went to college. "Be careful, we're very fertile in this family." Things went more or less smoothly in my pregnancy until a few days before my daughter's birth, when I went for a routine checkup at my obstetrician's office. She looked at my blood pressure, then took my reading 3 more times. Up until now, I hadn't had any issues, but on this day, my blood pressure was sky high. She immediately sent me to the hospital for monitoring. When the first preeclampsia test came back negative, the doctors on duty called for another test to make sure, because my blood pressure was still extremely high. But I went into labor very soon and before I could take the second test. Luckily, my doctor was on top of the situation from the moment she saw my blood pressure spike, but too many women's symptoms don't get noticed in time. Preeclampsia can kick in before or after birth, and the sudden rise in blood pressure can cause organ failure and death if it's not treated quickly enough. The complication usually starts around the 7th to 20th week of pregnancy or after, and the risk rises with maternal age. Our friend and upstairs neighbor, V, also suffered from preeclampsia when she gave birth this spring to a beautiful baby girl. V is an African-American woman in her late 30s who works in the music industry and stays fit, but she almost didn't survive the birth. Her blood pressure shot up a few days after she gave birth, and she had to rush back to the hospital, leaving the baby alone with the dad. Her midwife had noticed that her feet looked swollen, even when V didn't realize or feel like anything was wrong. Her partner texted us late one night, terrified, to tell us V had gone into the ICU. One harrowing week later, she finally came home. If no one had recognized V's swollen feet as a warning sign, her baby would have likely never seen her mom again. Too often, whether new moms survive their pregnancy and childbirth is a matter of luck. Too many women are dying in childbirth still, not because of untreatable medical emergencies, but because of inattentive staff, miscommunication among doctors, and issues related to structural racism and socioeconomic prejudice in hospitals. So does it take a certain amount of courage to add another risk factor like age, even if it's a relatively small risk, in a maternal health system that's so badly in need of repair? I hate that I think this way now. Women can, should, and do have more options now for becoming mothers later in life. But too often we don't get the information, the medical care, or the support we need to make that promise real. While I know plenty of women in their late 30s and 40s who got pregnant fairly quickly and had healthy babies, I'm now more aware of women who never could, even after spending tens of thousands of dollars on fertility treatments. I've talked to many women who felt crushed by it all as they neared 43 and beyond. None of their efforts to get pregnant naturally or otherwise had panned out, and they had to stop fertility treatments for financial or health reasons. Many didn't have the money to pay for assisted reproductive treatments in the first place. The heartbreak of trying and failing to get pregnant, of running out of time, shouldn't have come as a surprise, I suppose. But it was sobering to find out how much women have to spend to even have a chance at giving birth if natural conception doesn't work out. Is it the same old story that only the rich can win better odds than what nature doles out? Everything in me still wants to tell my young women friends that they can wait if they want to, that they can live full lives and honor any hesitation they might feel about becoming parents too soon. And now I know what I would have missed by not having kids. I don't want anyone who might like to have a child someday to bump up against the reality that they run out of time. While I don't have any answers yet about how women can live with the freedom and equality we deserve and stay healthy and solvent if we decide to delay parenthood, I'm optimistic that we'll discover solutions. No doubt that will mean electing well-informed and committed candidates to office, people who are up to speed on maternal health and devoted to fixing the inequities. Women may never be able to have kids as late in life as men can, and most of us may not even want to for our own sake or for our kids' sakes. But before long, with any luck, we really will be able to tell women that they can wait until their 40s or longer without gambling on their life plans or their lives. And it won't just be about pregnant celebrities making headlines in their 50s. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Broadwell. I'm coming to you here from Brooklyn. I became a mother in 1999 when I traveled to China to adopt my daughter, Lenny. I was 42 at the time. She'll be 23 in December. I've raised her as a single mother. My essay is called Life in Balance, and it's about an 8-year period of my life after my father had died unexpectedly. And I found myself caring for both a young child and for my mother, who was frail and aging. This type of caretaking is sometimes referred to as sandwich care. And according to the Pew Research Center, in 2020, 12% of parents in America found themselves caring for children under 18 and older relatives at the same time. In the coming decades, this figure is expected to grow as the number of people over 65 is projected to increase, and as more women in the US are expected to have children at a later age. My story of balanced caregiving began in the spring of 2004, and I'll read a little bit of it to you here. In the spring of 2004, my 79-year-old father, the bedrock of our family, a man with boundless energy, was diagnosed with mesothelioma, a rare form of lung cancer. How supremely unfair it felt that a man who had valued his health and had so much to live for would be struck with such a fatal illness. Within 6 months of his diagnosis, my father died, leaving me with countless business affairs to look after, a broken heart, and a mother and a daughter who were beyond bereaved. Eleni was 5, almost 6, when her grandpa died. So it was hard for her to comprehend how this vibrant man had left us. On the playground at school, Eleni would look up at the sky and see her grandfather's wispy white hair in the cloud formation above her. In class, she described his spirit as coming to her like a wind, helping her with her math problems. My dad was athletic, so in tribute to him, Eleni learned to play soccer and tennis. She was fast on her feet and adopted my father's work ethic. My mother, on the other hand, was 79 when her husband died. For years, her health had been faltering, first with coronary bypass surgery in her early 50s, then later with various issues causing memory loss and pain. My mother was surprisingly strong, having survived not only these health problems, but also the shelling of Athens during World War II. Yet somehow she liked to convince everyone that she was weak, a victim who needed constant care. My father had been that primary caregiver, her rock, her lifeline to the world. When he died, my mother was understandably adrift. In order to protect her, my father had declined to tell my mother exactly how sick he was, perhaps believing he had more time to live than he did. But her lack of emotional preparedness and the relative speed of my father's passing sent my mother into a tailspin. There were days when she stubbornly refused to take her medication and her memory loss worsened. There were times when she became short-tempered with Eleni and with me. As the weeks passed, I tried to keep our lives in Brooklyn in balance. My daughter was in first grade now, learning to read, write, and socialize. I was working from home as a freelance writer and editor, which gave me flexibility in times of work, in flexibility in terms of time and workflow. But every weekend, Eleni and I would run out to my mother's house some 50 miles away to check up on her and a family friend who'd agreed to stay temporarily. My mother was sad, lonely, and increasingly confused, and it became clear she would soon need a higher level of care. The turning point came a short while later when my mother arrived at my apartment for an extended visit. As she bent to tie her shoelaces one day, she slipped and fell, fracturing a bone in her back. It was the last day my mother would walk independently. She would soon need a wheelchair. Faced with this new set of circumstances and knowing my mother could no longer live independently, I decided to move her to Brooklyn, into a sunny assisted care facility near my home. I hired loving professional aides to care for her, and I visited almost daily. But although the logistics of having my mother close by made life easier, I was still racked with guilt. I knew my mom was suffering. For one thing, my mother wanted to go home, and home meant her house on Long Island. Because of her deepening dementia and overwhelming grief, my mother couldn't understand why she couldn't live alone and why my father had left her. In an effort to comfort her and settle her nerves, I brought my mother personal belongings, including a painting she loved of me and Eleni. I also brought my 6-year-old daughter to visit whenever possible. Sometimes Eleni would draw or play contentedly, and sometimes we would all sit together on the couch, watching Dancing with the Stars and other things on TV. But on other days, both my mother and Eleni would vie for my attention while an aide was trying to talk to me. At still other times, Eleni found it too hard to visit. It was tough for her to reconcile the grandma she'd once known with the one now lying in a hospital bed. How could this be possible? For more than 8 years, I was tasked with balancing the needs of both my mother and my daughter. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I want to start off by saying that I want to thank Nan and Vicki for including me in this wonderful book. My name is Jean Leung. The name of my piece is My Grandmother, My Mother, Myself, and My Son. I have a different take on older parents because not only am I an older parent, but I am the child of an older parent who herself was the product of an older parent. I don't have the time to go into the reasons why this happened, but if you want to fill in the dots, you can read my piece in my book. We're not sure exactly how old my grandmother was when she gave birth to my mother, but what we do know is that by the time she was born, she had siblings who were married with children. My mother was 44 when I was born, and I gave birth to my son at the age of 40. My mother didn't see her situation as unique. I guess She wasn't the only one in the small rural community she grew up in. In my piece, however, I go into both my perspective as well as my son's on what it was like to have an older than average parent. This is what I wrote about how I felt. I saw the contrast between my family and other families. Friends and classmates reported going to Little League, dance lessons, movies, and parks with their parents. Money was probably an issue, as was work. But a bigger reason, which I didn't realize at the time, was that my parents hadn't grown up this way. They didn't know that this way of life existed, so they couldn't act upon it. I believe the age difference between my parents and the other parents, who all seemed much younger, I blamed it on that. If my parents were normal aged parents, I thought, they would have taught me how to throw a ball, bicycle, swim, etc. They expected me to go to college, but could not give me any guidance or support. Retirement loomed up on the horizon, so they couldn't help me out. They couldn't help me out financially. If only Mom and Dad were younger, I believe, things would have been better. I swore I'd never have a child late in life. People over 40 had no business having children, I thought. But as you know, from my parents in this book, I changed my mind. Why? Once again, read my piece if you want to know. Nevertheless, my decision to become a parent is the best one I've ever made. But what about the child that was created out of this decision? From my piece again. I recently asked my adult son how he felt about having an older parent. What he remembered most was our lack of interest in sports. As he got older, however, he realized that this had more to do with us as individuals than our age. I had come from an immigrant family, and my husband was an immigrant. We both came from cultures where American sports such as baseball and basketball were not emphasized. He also complained about our overscheduling him with after school and weekend activities, and was envious of his friends who seemed to have more unstructured time. Jacob was right about this being a result of us being older. We had so many experiences that we wanted him to have. I also had a pressing sense of urgency that time was passing by. There were so many opportunities in the city he grew up in for enrichment in the arts and sciences. Perhaps younger parents would have been more relaxed about this, or maybe even too busy. But did he suffer in the long run? I think he and I could agree that he didn't, and in fact, benefited from this. There were more possibilities to make friends, to explore the world, and form his own likes and dislikes. As you can hear, my son doesn't believe that my age negatively impacted upon his upbringing overall. And when I look upon my own childhood, I feel the same way. I can't deny that my mother, my son, and I face special challenges, but we'd like to think that they made us stronger and maybe even better people. Older parents, perhaps because they are aware of their own mortality, encourage their kids to be more self-resilient, and that is never a bad thing.
Hi, I'm Kathy Arnst. I'm just going to read an abbreviated version of my essay, which is titled, "What is Hard?" In the 22 years since I adopted my daughter as a single 45-year-old woman, I cannot count the times I have fielded comments along the lines of, "Isn't it hard raising a child on your own?" Or, You're so brave adopting a child on your own. It must be hard. The less diplomatic might even remark, a child at your age? How hard is that? I usually smile politely and say, it's not that hard. Sometimes, though, when I'm not feeling all that generous, I give an honest answer. Watching someone you love die is hard. This is easy. I did watch someone die, my husband, at age 42 of a brain tumor, just 2 years after we were married. That was unspeakably hard. Motherhood, not so much. I met Peter Sleeper in Boston when I was 33 and he 38, both of us reporters. We were each too cynical to use the word soulmate, but we would have if we dared. In August 1988, we were married. While on our honeymoon, Peter kept getting headaches. When we got back, he learned that a pituitary tumor, which he thought had been successfully removed several years earlier, had recurred. He had brain surgery, then another, then radiation. Although we both wanted children, I thought we should wait for him to be cured before starting a family. A bad decision. The tumor was in remission when I was offered my dream job, European science correspondent with Reuters. We rented out our house and moved to London. And shortly after arriving, Peter consulted with a leading specialist and discovered that the tumor was growing again. Still, this type of brain tumor is rarely fatal. We refused to accept that we were living on borrowed time, but we were. Peter died in London Hospital in October 1990, 2 months to the day after my mother died of an asthma attack at age 63. Peter's death and my mother's left me a zombie, alone and adrift. I couldn't lean on my father, who was even more of a wreck than me. My London friends were wonderful, but I still felt alone. Back home, the US was mired in a recession sparked by a housing crash, and our Boston home was part of the collapse. Within months of Peter's death, the bank foreclosed. I was 37 and utterly shattered. In 1 year, I had lost the love of my life. I was financially ruined and essentially without family. I sleepwalked through the next 3 years in London until I decided enough, and I accepted a job at a magazine in New York. My plan was to get my head together, fall in love with someone new, and start a family. I got 2 out of 3. That's how I found myself standing in a courtyard in central China in November 1999, meeting my 11-month-old daughter for the first time, Jessie Ruth Arnst. She took one look at me, started to scream, and kept it up for the next 8 hours. What had I done? How would I, a single middle-aged woman, ever manage this ball of emotional need? My first parental lesson was that I couldn't do it alone. My good friend Nancy insisted on coming to China with me, and thank God for Nancy. It quickly became clear that I had no idea how to care for a baby, but Nancy, a mother of 2, had seen it all. Once we got through that first stressful day, Jessie woke up the next morning smiling, and she was Miss Congeniality for the rest of the trip. I arrived home in Brooklyn 2 weeks later, jet-lagged and clueless. I had smugly assumed that I, an experienced journalist, would have no problem caring for a baby. Ha! Luckily, the village around me came to my rescue. My upstairs neighbor, Alice, with 2 daughters of her own, made sure I had everything I needed, including 2 extra hands. Multiple friends guided me through the land of parenthood. I was mature enough to know what I didn't know, which turned out to be a lot. I took advantage of all the help and advice. My 3 months of home leave was almost too easy. Then reality hit. It was time to return to my demanding job as a senior writer for a weekly magazine. I'd read every disheartening article about how hard it is to juggle work and family, so of course I was anxious. The raised eyebrows I kept getting when I told people I was just raising Jessie without a partner, and at my age, didn't help. Maybe this really is too hard, I worried. But then along came a miracle in the person of Cheryl, the world's best nanny and Jessie's second mother. I immediately made one of my wisest decisions ever. Trust Cheryl completely. I gave Cheryl carte blanche to care for Jessie as she saw fit. I never questioned her, and she in turn took Jessie and our household well in hand. To this day, we remain close to Cheryl and her family. Nights and weekends, I leaned on my friends or complete strangers. An example, When Jessie was 2, I took her to the beach for the first time. It hadn't occurred to me to bring snacks or water. A Guatemalan family nearby saw my dilemma, took pity on my poor girl. Even though they barely spoke English, they happily fed us and handed Jessie juice boxes, instructed their kids to play with her, and even watched her while I went swimming. It doesn't just take a village, it takes a world. Toddlerhood passed with a minimum of tantrums that I can remember, and by the time Jessie started kindergarten, she was happy, healthy, and outgoing. The advantages of parenting while older were paying off. I was established in my career, so able to afford to hire Cheryl, and Brooklyn was filled with older single moms, many of them with children adopted from China, and I became close friends with several. I had the benefit of years of hard-won experiences and tragedies to give me some perspective on the everyday problems that might have caused me to worry obsessively when I was younger. Also, I was extraordinarily lucky. Terrible things can happen to children: drug addiction, depression, bullying, illness, violence, that bear no relation to the parents' child rearing choices or age. I would caution against a glib assumption that the age or lifestyle of a parent can set the stage for cataclysm. My own experiences and those of my close friends prove such assumptions are nothing more than biases. I don't want to imply that Jessie and I faced no challenges. When Jessie hit puberty, she turned into a monster with terrible grades and discipline problems to match, and I admit that sometimes I second-guessed my decision to adopt at age 45. I could have been drinking wine in Italy with sane adults instead of drinking wine in Brooklyn to calm down from our latest screaming matches. Then again, you can only spend so much time in Italy before you must come home alone. And I would have missed the adventure of a lifetime watching Jessie grow into a wonderful young woman. The terrible tweens were mercifully brief, and by high school, she was relatively normal. She graduated from college in 2020, and today she is a funny, kind, independent young woman who is a delight to spend time with. I still have time to drink wine with my friends. I don't feel like I sacrificed anything by starting parenthood later in life. Considering the alternatives, it's been pretty easy. Thank you.
Now, if everyone would come back to the screen, we could have a brief discussion, and if you have questions, put them in the question and answer. I hope everyone got a sense of the richness of TikTok. And I do want to say to Kathy, drinking in Brooklyn is not so bad. Some of us, and I think that's one of the points that a lot of people make in the book, that they had fulfilled a lot of their career
It's been
choices.
done.
What? And they had also gotten to a point where they had a certain amount of finances, and they had done all the going to bars or whatever, and that they were very it was very clear that they wanted to be parents, and they weren't sort of ambivalent about it. Anyway, and of course, you can't make generalizations, but I just did. Here's a question I have for all of you, or whoever wants to answer it. And some of you suggested already in your reading, what was the impact on you of writing this piece? Did it affect you? Did you understand new things about yourself? Did you understand yourself as a parent, as an older parent? What did it help you? Where did it lead you? And I think, Salma talked about it, resolving contradictions or wrestling with contradictions. So if anyone can add to how did this piece affect you in any way? Also, the second part of the question is, and some of you do have older children now, did you share this with your child? Will you share it? And if so, did they have reactions? And Jean talked about, in a sense, asking her son about having an older parent. So let me open it up. Just jump in.
Well, in my piece, obviously, I talked about talking to my son about having an older parent, but it made me realize that I had never really actually talked to my own mother about her being an older parent. So I could just surmise, I guess, that she just didn't think it was out of the extraordinary.
Anyone else about writing the piece? Vicki, can you
Well,
share?
Yes, I shared it with my daughter. Actually, my daughter and Laura's daughter were friendly for many, many years, and that was part of a community of support. Really, thank you, Laura. I shared it with my daughter, and it was very difficult because in my case, I had lost my daughter many years before, and so by the time she read this, she was 21, and I adopted her as an infant. So the loss of my daughter was quite long ago, but she found, I think it was very comforting. She actually said to me that it was very moving. And that she really had sort of a very touching response to it, because I think she understood when she came into my life, how she came into my life, and how important she was to me. So it was very healing to actually write the piece.
I did share it with my daughter back, it's a little hard to remember back when I wrote it. And
We're losing some of it.
Yeah, I can't hear you exactly.
Was somewhat surprised because she said she never thought of me as an older parent. I don't know.
That's a shame.
The connection is not
Can you
good.
hear me? Oh, okay. So anyway, she commented that she didn't really ever think of me as an old. Oh, I don't know what to do about that.
Maybe
should I? Well,
maybe somebody else should jump in, and maybe Kathy, I don't know if you should come out and come back in or what. Stephanie, if you have any idea from community books what Kathy should do. Anyone else want to talk about the writing of it?
I'll talk. It was really, this piece was really hard for me to write. We've now, because of COVID, the book was supposed to come out a little while ago. So we've all written these pieces 2.5 years ago. But it was a very, as people have said, a very healing process, a very hard process, because the piece is, much longer than from what I read. But it was just a very, very hard time in my life, about 8.5 years. And I did share the piece with my daughter, and I will share it with her again. I shared it with her a little while ago, because she was very much part of it. I think there is something about writing that kind of puts things, it kind of puts things in perspective, I think, for people, or for me as a writer. And I think I will share it with my daughter again. I think it's something that she can read, at different times in her life, since she was so young when all of this happened. She's almost 23. And also friends with Vicki's daughter for many years, and with Kathy's daughter for many years as well. So.
Kathy, you want to try again?
Yeah, I just moved into closer to my modem, but is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to say that I shared it with my daughter, and her comment was she was somewhat surprised because she never thought of me as an older parent, because we live in Brooklyn and most of my friends are older parents, and even friends, most of my close friends didn't have children until they were at least in their late 30s. So it didn't seem odd to her. She had other issues with me, which we won't go into.
I've wondered if I want to share this with my kids. They're 6 and 8 now, so they're too young for me to share this with them still. But at some point, I think I'd like to. Although I'm worried. I only read a kind of a stitched together series of excerpts from my essay, but a lot of the essay in the beginning, at least, is about my profound ambivalence about having kids, and I guess I'm worried I'll hurt their feelings. That wow, you really didn't want us, did you? Although by the time I finally decided to do it, I did I did really want them, and they've been the best thing in my life. But yeah, I think I do. On the other hand, I'd like my daughter to kind of feel like it's okay to be ambivalent and to maybe not have kids if she doesn't want to. Although I do want grandkids, so that's
Salma, did you share it with any of your Lebanese relatives, the piece?
Not yet. So I sent an email blast to friends and family, and I told my mother that although I do talk about how a lot of my Lebanese relatives, were really worried that I wasn't going to have kids. Oh my God, this is scandals, but my parents, bless them, have been very open-minded about it. And I gave them credit in one sentence about that. So I kind of wanted my mom to know that I was at pains to basically say, no, but you weren't the one pressuring me. But they haven't read it yet. They've ordered books. A number of my relatives have. So hopefully,
I also have to say that in my essay, I also express ambivalence, as I did mention in my piece, about having children. And then after that, about having older children, children as an older parent. In my family, it is quite obvious, the craziness, the age difference, because like my mother, by the time I was born, my sister was married with 2 children. So I was, in fact, I was a great aunt before I was born.
Another question I have, which is related to part 5, which Vicki talked about, because no one here is in part 5, and it's called Building Community and Changing the Narrative. Can any of you talk about how you got support, how you found family, either your own family or alternative families, how you created community? And was it particularly harder, do you think, as an older parent for that? And I think, was it Laura? I'm not sure who talked about turning to friends and strangers. Was that Laura? I'm not sure.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, Kathy. Okay.
Yeah.
But
I have to say, I think one of the advantages of being an older parent, at least for me, is that I really I had no ego about accepting help and advice. I wasn't trying to prove anything. And I cannot tell you how much my friends have always been my family. I don't really have a family. And although I think my cousin Leslie might be listening, and I do have her, but she's in LA. And I just got so much help. My upstairs neighbor Alice was amazing. Nancy and Tim, Jesse's godparents, have been there for her and for me. My friends, I have so many close friends, and I was just overwhelmed with how they just came out and helped and supported me, and people in the neighborhood. Laura helped me, everyone. And I think that, being older, you're more able to, maybe, I don't know, or maybe it's me, I just was able to reach out. And I think I had realized from having suffered some really terrible loss in my life that it's important to reach out and ask for help. And boy, I asked for help from everybody. I asked for help from teenage boys to carry the stroller up in the subway. I mean, I was not shy about asking for help. And luckily, almost everybody came through. So.
Yeah, I must say, Kathy, I loved and quoted your statement in the introduction about it not only takes a village, it takes a world. I really feel that's true. And I felt that the world was quite friendly, even though the policies in our country are not so friendly. The community that we're in a very special community, I think. It was really, really helpful. I mean, my daughter was in a cooperative. It was more than cooperative, the daycare center where we all, it was a collective, so we all took turns and we all were part of it. So it really did feel like an extended family in many ways. And it was interesting that I gravitated for my own friendships to other mothers who were older with kids. I mean, and now we know that there's so many of us out there that that's not impossible to do, to create a community like that.
Yeah.
Salma, you talk in your piece, another way of finding support or community. You established a website, right? And that creates community. We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I set up, I established a website called Crunch Time Parents, which I created kind of as a way to try to build a community of people who were having kids later. And first I started out wanting to call it Crunch Time Moms. And I decided, and I was workshopping the titles with friends of mine. They're like, just make it about parents in general, because I wanted to have, everyone involved as well. And I created the website at a time when I was very much in my woohoo, we can do this. We can wait as long as we want, not as long as we want, but we can wait until our 40s at least and have kids, and things can turn out quite well, knock wood. And, we're being sold this false bill of goods about how, advanced maternal age is dangerous and geriatric pregnancies are dangerous. My own OBGYN said, I don't believe any of that. If I think, up until well into your 40s or a certain age, everything can go perfectly well if you take care of yourself. And if we make sure that we are, keeping close tabs on everything. So I was feeling very much this sense of like, woohoo, the time is finally here when we can do this. And then the more I created content for my website and talked to people and interviewed and did Q&As and talked to, my community and my kind of expanding community of older parents, the more I realized that the picture is much more complicated than that. And that it's so much of it is about access. I mean, some of it is about, certain health risks that you take on having kids later, but a lot of that is really more about a failure of the healthcare system to really intervene in time and to keep, to kind of do its part, and also a lack of access for women to be able to access the healthcare and the, reproductive technology and all that. So I kind of was doing a deep dive into all the different factors. But in doing so, I did create a community by interviewing people from my site. But one thing I have to say, though, truth be told, is I found it hard to kind of get people to really comment and kind of have an internal dialogue on the site. And so I started posting less, and I occasionally post, and I want to come back to it and build it out more. But that's the part that I had a hard time with, is how to kind of keep it going as a place where people can all come and have a kind of dialogue together.
I think that Vicki and I did this book to create community. And I don't have a piece in it because I adopted my daughter when I was 35, but that was in 1977. So I think that is at least, at that point, that was old. And most of my friends already had teenagers. But we create community by putting this book together. Other thoughts, questions, comments? So I don't see any questions from the audience. Anyone? Well, yes? Anyone? I think we could sort of end here because we covered a lot of things. I hope people do buy the book and do buy books from Community Books. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
I am popping back to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining us. And we hope you'll pick up the book at Community Bookstore. And we hope to see you again sometime soon, either in person at the store or here on Zoom. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.